Hi everyone. Here is the topic of presentation, disaster e-health. And in this presentation, I'm discussing the following topics: disasters and why they are important, the two disciplines of disaster management and disaster medicine, e-health technologies and the role of e-health technologies in the disaster, and talking a little bit about the research methodology to carry out the following research topic, including a scoping study, use case methodology, and Delphie technique. Okay, disasters. It doesn't matter the root is natural or man-made, and even in some stages, infectious disease become a disaster. So disaster consider a disruptive event which impede the current resources and change the normal situation to the disaster situation. Regardless of their nature, man-made or natural, they have the same consequences. The number of disasters and the frequency of disasters have an upward trend in recent years, and following affected number of people and the total damage caused by disasters increasing highly. And we anticipate and expect that the number of disasters by 2020 grow to higher level. In the disasters, the most important and immediate aspect is the health-related of the disaster victims. It can be injuries, trauma, and long-term medical condition, which is physical as well as mental. So, in order to deal with disasters, the following disaster disciplines are using: disaster management and disaster medicine. Disaster management is the coordination and integration of all activities that necessary to build, sustain, and improve the current and capabilities to prepare for, respond to, and recover from disaster. Generally, we categorize disaster management in two main parts. The first one is pre-disaster, preparedness and mitigation, and the second one is the post-disaster, disaster response and recovery. The next topic is disaster medicine. It is a combination of disaster management, clinical medicine, and public health, and the ultimate goal is responding to the health demand of the victims. There are some problems here in these two current disciplines. The first one is both of them have different routes, development and priority. The second is they mostly fail to share their tools and personnel and have not collaborated smoothly. Disaster medicine has a poor communication with disaster management, and both of them have already exist, but they are not integrated, which is problematic. And none of them use the new range of new ICT technologies and modern e-health technologies in their process and their cycle. And the other problem is one of the main sessions of each disaster and main section is the healthcare sector. But emergency management or disaster management and healthcare sector just recently began to recognize each other. Therefore, I come up with a new research paradigm, and we call it disaster e-health. It's a combination of disaster management, disaster medicine, and e-health. And we define it as the application of ICT in disaster to restore and sustain the health of individuals and community at pre-disaster levels. It has two main goals. The first one is provide disaster responders with skills and tools to deliver effective and appropriate healthcare. And the second one is embed e-health technologies into a standard disaster management and medicine practice. Regarding the e-health technology, the definition is the cost-effective and secure use of ICT to support health and health-related fields, including the health services, health literature, and health education. Again, for e-health technologies, I divided them into two main categories: the existing application of the e-health and the emerging application. Existing application is something that currently is widely used, like EHR, decision support system in healthcare, mobile health, and telehealth. And the emerging technologies are the new range of technologies which is current, they want to use it in the healthcare. Internet of Things, social networking, and big data together with cloud computing. Why we consider e-health as a solution for the mentioned problem? Because they provide support, and more importantly, they provide portable, personalized health information system. Also, they enhance response to disaster and public health emergencies. A question is here, there is a question, because somebody may say e-health technology currently used in a healthcare system, but there is no model for its usage in a disaster. My research come up with the following research questions. The first one is the scope of DH, disaster e-health. What is its scope, its boundary? And the second one is, can we represent disaster scenarios with a use case methodology, for example, in the domain of DH, because use case methodology mostly used in the software engineering, but now I want to use them to create and generate scenarios for the DH. The next one is, what technology is appropriate for these use cases? Because up until now, we choose 8 technologies, so which one is more appropriate for which cases? And the next one is, how can these use cases support practitioners? And what sorts of competencies and protocols will be needed for this technology application? In order to answer the research question, 3 different research methodologies are being used. The first one is a scoping study in order to find a boundary for DEH. The next one is use case methodology in order to answer the research question 2. And Delphie Techniques in order to get the feedback from experts of the field for the 3 remaining questions. In the scoping study field, it's some kind of research methodology which is aimed to map rapidly the key concept underpinning a research question. Therefore, I consider this one is a good option for finding the boundary for DEH, because when the area is complex and it's difficult to visualize the range of material, and also it has no literature, it is a good research methodology in order to find it. It comes up in a framework in the stages. The first stage is identify the research questions by doing the scoping study, then identify relevant studies according to the research question, a study selection, charting the data, and the final stage is collecting, summarizing, and reporting data. For the purpose of my research, I did 2 kinds of scoping study. One was uncontrolled, and I gathered around 3,000 articles. And the other one is controlled scoping study, and for that one, I have gathered 1,000 articles. Use case methodology, as I said, it's a research methodology which is used in the software engineering field, and it's a description of the typical interaction between one or many actors and the systems. In the field of DH, the actors of the DH consider disaster managers and disaster medicine people, and the field or domain or the system is disaster e-health. In the use case methodology, we want to gather the requirements of the customers, disaster managers, and disaster medicine in a systematic way. And for evaluating our findings from scoping the studies together with the use case methodology, Delphie Techniques will be used, because in a Delphie, it's a consultation with the expert of the field. Again, when the area is complex and we require feedback and knowledge from the people who already know and understand the domain, Delphie technique is a most popular research methodology, and it brings opportunity for individuals to revise the available views. And finally, the outcome of research, it is the new discipline of disaster e-health and its scope. And the next outcome is a model that can tell experts in the domain of disaster management and disaster medicine how to use what technology in which disaster situation according to the disaster characteristics and characteristics of technology itself. And the final result is to improve disaster healthcare in all phases of the disaster cycle. Thank you very much for your attention.
Any questions? What's kind of disaster that you think about in your mind that you're going to use it?
Sorry?
What types of disaster that you think that you
Actually, because disaster e-health is a new emergent field, so we need to think about all kinds of disaster. It's maybe some kind of complex thing, but we divided disaster based on their nature into 2 or 3 different groups. That's why I cannot say a particular disaster. It's for all kinds of disasters.
Can it be applied to human-made disasters like war?
Yes. Because in the beginning of session, I classified disaster into man-made disaster and natural disaster, and even sometimes infectious disease in certain stage like Ebola or SARS become a disaster, an international disaster, so I consider those infectious disease as well.
Thank you. On behalf of the University Postgraduate Center, I would like to thank you for sharing your presentation. And this is a small token of appreciation from us.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your attention. Thank you all.